the Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com.
Never been afraid to say what's on my mind at any given time of day, cause I'm a renegade. Never been afraid to talk about anything. Renegade. Never been afraid to say what's on my mind at any given time of day.
Welcome in to the Sports Renegades here on SportsTownChicago.com. I'm Ryan Stuppridge.
And I'm Ryan Risky.
And to start off the show, now joining us on the Illinois Center for Broadcasting hotline, we have Mark Grote, the new pre- and post-game host for the Chicago Cubs on 780 WBBM. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Ryan, how you guys doing tonight?
We're doing well, and I guess we really wanted to start off talking about the Cubs since you're going to be pretty close to the organization. What have you seen so far? Because I know you were in Arizona about 3 weeks ago. What's surprised you the most about this Cubs team so far?
I don't know if anything has really stood out to me as as a huge surprise. I guess maybe Chris Bryant has been eye-opening. I mean, considering the guy hit 43 home runs last year in the minors, I don't know if I can say that I'm surprised by what he has done, but I guess I'm always a little bit surprised that in sports in general, when massive expectations are put on a player, and to some degree, and I am keeping in mind that this is only spring training, to some degree that person lives up to it, because every time Chris Bryant comes up to the plate, the guy is expected to hit a home run, and basically most of the time that he's come up to the plate in spring training, he has hit home runs, and he's certainly been the story of it. The other thing that stood out in my time at spring training for sure was the new manager, Joe Maddon, who is just an incredibly interesting guy. And the part about him that is most interesting to me is that here you have a 60-year-old man who you would expect at this point in time in his life, who's a baseball lifer basically, who you would expect to sort of be a person who is set in his ways, and he's just not. He's an innovative guy. He's willing to listen to hear to what the next big thing is. He was on the ground floor with sabermetrics and bringing computers into baseball, and now he's like thinking, what's the next thing? So the guy is like a 60-year-old man with that wealth of knowledge, but sort of the eagerness, and I'm not just saying this, of a 30-year-old man who is, ready for whatever the next thing is. So yeah, it's going to be for me personally and selfishly, it's going to be a blast covering the new manager of the Cubs, Joe Maddon.
Who do you think is going to end up winning the battle between Travis Wood and Edwin Jackson for the fifth starter spot?
Well, it's funny, now this is one area where I sort of disagree with Joe Maddon, because he's talked about, we're going to be creative and find a way where we can have both of those guys, use them to the best of both of their abilities and put them in the right spots, and as if it was almost going to be a platoon starting situation. I think Travis Wood looks much better than Edwin Jackson has, and Wood has been sort of on and off during this track. The one thing, so the answer is I think Travis Wood should be the fifth starter, and I think he probably will. I mean, Maddon is pretty careful not to slam players, through the media, or really say what's going on with players in terms of protecting their egos and things like that. But the thing about Travis Wood is he really had just one awful year, and that was last year. I mean, 2 years ago, again, albeit on an awful team, he was an all-star, and he's always been a decent, serviceable, legit 4 or 5 guy in a rotation. So I guess I haven't really understood the urgency to want to trade him, to wonder if he's going to be the fifth starter. To me, he's the legit fifth starter, Travis Wood.
Now, how about John Lester? I know he had what people are calling a dead arm. Are you concerned about him at all, or do you think he'll be fine and ready to go opening day?
I think when you tell Cubs fans that your $155 million guy has an arm that is dead, that one is allowed to be alarmed by it, I guess you just have to believe the player and managers and other players when they talk about dead arm, and they say that this has happened before, and that Lester said it's actually fairly typical, and it's fairly typical this time of the year. all you can do is believe the guy. But I would say, yes, of course you're allowed to be a little bit concerned when you hear that a guy has a dead arm or a tired arm. I mean, any injury concerning a pitcher and using what he uses to make his living and to entertain Cubs fans, if that is not working right, then it takes me back a little bit, and it needs to be monitored and to be taken for what it is. It is minor, but it's an arm injury, so be concerned until it's not an arm injury.
Now, what do you think about Javier Baez and what he's done this spring, and do you think he's deserving of a spot on the opening day roster?
Well, I mean, hitting-wise, he's kind of like he was during the season, and I didn't think that was good enough to be on a major league roster. Now, Joe Madden thinks that his defense and his baseball smarts in general, overall, make up for that, and that's going to be good enough. But he did have success in the minor leagues after slow starts at all levels, so I don't know. I feel like he'd probably be better off getting tuning up a little bit in the minors. I mean, I think the guy's going to be a star, and I think the guy's going to be capable of hitting 40 home runs a year for sure. But it just seems like he needs to go where there's no pressure for a minute, tune it up a little bit, dial it up, and then come up rather quickly. Just needs a little bit more time. That's what I think.
Now, what do you think about realistic expectations in terms of batting average and maybe walks for Javier Baez? And do you think that he can hit for at least a decent average and walk a decent amount to be more serviceable as a big leaguer where you can live with the strikeouts, since he's going to be a guy that strikes out a lot?
Yeah, well, he certainly has not shown the ability to take a walk. I mean, I think he had like 2 or 3 coming into a couple of days ago. I haven't checked his exact walk line at this point, but I mean, he strikes out a ton and he doesn't walk, so it's kind of hard to project really good things in that capacity. I mean, I know that he, from the time I was there, he was talking to us about how he was lowering his hands and how he played winter ball and how he's taking all these suggestions and he's really taking that stuff seriously. And he's got a lot of guys in his head, a lot of guys in his ears, trying to tell him what the best thing to do is. And I think that when you're Javier Baez and you are an absolute star at every level of your life and you pound home runs with that crazy, torqued, unbelievable swing, it's really hard to want to change things. And to some degree, I totally agree. It's like, if you have success doing that, then you might as well do it. But then you have to make small adjustments, and it probably just feels awkward to him at this point. But yeah, at this point, I mean, walks are not coming, batting average is not coming. The only thing that you can say, I mean, just go with Joe Madden. It's that the guy is he's a plus defensive player.
And depending on how the Cubs season goes this year, do you think that we could see Addison Russell up possibly in September? Or if the Cubs are doing really well and they're in a race for the division or wild card, do you think that they would hold off on that?
Yeah, no, I would love to see Addison Russell. I think if things go sour for the Cubs and nobody wants to see that again, then I think you could very well see Addison Russell as one of the first call-ups, because he is definitely good. He is smooth, and whenever you hear people say, "Well, he's good beyond his years," I mean, that's what I read about him, and then I saw him. I watched the way he handled himself, and that's a legit compliment towards him. I mean, he's a good hitter. It's all fields. I would love to see him. I don't know if he would be. It's a good question on the if the Cubs are good and they're in a playoff race, would he be somebody they would add, or do you put him? This is something for you guys to kick around. I mean, do you put a rookie into in a pressure cooker situation in his first major league action? I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that Theo Epstein and Jed Hoyer and the rest of the Cubs brain trust have a good handle on that.
Now, do you think that with C.J. Edwards, as if Edwin Jackson and Travis Wood, if they both either don't perform to expectations or are good enough to be a number 5 starter, that he could either be brought up to be the number 5 starter at some point this season, or they could call him up if someone in the bullpen goes down with an injury or is ineffective, to be kind of really an unknown weapon late in the season.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I think it's all about how durable he remains. He had some problems with his shoulder last year, and how effective he is in the minors, obviously, as well. I mean, the one thing about him that stands, I mean, he's good. The one thing that stands out about him is when you see him in person, he is a skinny guy. He is there's not a lot of meat on them bones, so you can see a scenario where he might be sort. You guys remember Juan Cruz, the pitcher, the old reliever?
Oh yeah,
yep.
Yeah, he is like that kind of skinny, and maybe even a little bit skinnier. So when you talk to scouts and talk to people, they say that that can be an issue in terms of durability and things like that. But he's legit. He's a good pitcher, and yeah, if he stays healthy and he pitches well in the minors, I definitely think you could see C.J. Edwards in a spot start this year.
I wanted to have your opinion on this DePaul stuff, as Oliver Purnell resigned as the coach, and as you know, I'm a big DePaul fan. I'm not sure who they're going to hire as their head coach, but I feel like anything's an improvement.
Yeah, it's very complicated. DePaul's always been my team too. I grew up a massive DePaul fan, and I luckily was a youngster growing up when DePaul existed in its heyday, and it was a legit program. So for me, I have a different perspective than maybe you guys do, or other people that are a lot younger than me.
Right.
That have just seen a program just be awful. I look at it a little bit differently. I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is. I mean, I think I know the answer, because I mean, in these days of college basketball, it is, for better or for worse, it is exactly about who you can get to recruit people. Who are the guys that resonate with kids? If obviously when John Calipari goes into a kid's living room, their eyes are wide open and they're signing before they have a chance to offer him a cup of coffee at the table because he's John freaking Calipari. So I don't know that I mean, realistically, it's hard to get a big name, but if DePaul is serious about winning and serious about getting back to being a legit player in college basketball, and in this town of Chicago, which they once were, there was a time when it was hard to get a ticket to see the DePaul Blue Demons. If they're serious about that, then they go find a guy who has a name, and you throw crazy, silly, ridiculous money at this person, because that's the only thing that's going to lure a real name head coach. I guess I like some of the names that I've heard. I mean, I like Bryce Drew, and I like Bobby Hurley, because there is that connect to be able to put Duke on your business card. Even though these kids probably obviously never saw Bobby Hurley, probably know very little about Bobby Hurley in his playing days. If you could put Duke on your business card, there is something to that, because to the kids that play high school ball in town right now, it's the cool thing, it's the posh thing to get out of here. It's like any of us who thought about going away to college. Right now, high school kids, the goal is to go far away from Chicago. Love Chicago, come back to Chicago, but you know what? When you play your ball, it's much more posh and fashionable to go play for Duke than it is to stay in Chicago and play for DePaul or UIC or Loyola or even University of Illinois, for that matter. It's all about getting out of here. So.
Yeah, I always found that interesting too. I do think that if they got a guy like Bobby Hurley, I think it would be a really good thing. Like you said, he has Duke on his resume, and then of course Northwestern's head coach. Now he was an assistant at Duke for a while with Coach K. So
Chris
maybe
Collins,
you can get two together like
played
that.
At Duke as well, and was an assistant there for forever. Obviously, I root for Northwestern to do well, for Chris Collins to do well, but so far not so good. It's the same old story at Northwestern, and it's funny because they've had two. It's funny how the philosophy changes. Like, they've had two older coaches in Oliver Purnell, and Jerry Wainwright, for the last couple of coaches. So now it's like everybody's, we got to get somebody who's young and energetic. And no, I mean, that would be great. That's fine. I like that philosophy. You have to get somebody who could recruit players, and if that's a young and energetic guy, fine. If it's an old man with a big name, then that's fine too. Whatever it is, that resonates with kids, then make it happen. Because John Calipari is turning into an old man, Roy Williams is turning into an old man, and these guys have zero problem